Once upon a time, in a small, peaceful village nestled at the foot of a mighty mountain, there lived a community of farmers, hunters, and traders. The land was fertile, and the people thrived in harmony with nature. But this tranquility was shattered when rumors began to spread about a terrifying beast, a creature known as the Nunda. Whispers filled the air with stories of its insatiable hunger for human flesh, its glowing red eyes, and the blood-curdling roar that echoed through the night. The villagers lived in constant fear, for they knew the Nunda was not just a creature of legend, it was real. The villagers gathered in the center of the village one evening to discuss the rumors. A wise elder, known for his vast knowledge of the world and its creatures, stood before the crowd. With a heavy heart, he told them of the Nunda, an ancient beast feared by many across the land. According to the elder, the Nunda was a creature unlike any other. It was said to be a giant, dark beast, with fur as black as the night sky, and teeth as sharp as daggers. The elder spoke of how the Nunda could move faster than the wind, making it impossible to escape its grasp. Its hunger was endless, and it would stop at nothing to devour anyone who crossed its path. Days turned into weeks, and the villagers grew more anxious. Every night, the sound of howling winds would echo through the valley, and many feared that the Nunda's roar was just beyond the hills. One evening, a young hunter named Cato, who had heard the stories since childhood, decided he could no longer wait for the beast to strike. Cato was known for his bravery and sharp senses. With a bow and a quiver of arrows, he set off alone into the wilderness, determined to track down the Nunda and end its reign of terror. The village elders cautioned him, warning that the beast was no ordinary creature. But Cato's resolve was firm, he would not let the Nunda destroy his home. Cato's journey took him deep into the heart of the wild. As he ventured further, the air grew thick with tension, and every rustling leaf seemed to whisper warnings. He had heard stories of the Nunda's terror, but nothing could have prepared him for the eerie silence that enveloped the forest. There were no birds singing, no animals moving. It was as if the land itself held its breath, waiting for something to happen. Cato felt a chill run down his spine, but he pressed on, determined to face the creature that had haunted his people for so long. As night fell, Cato found himself at the edge of a dark ravine. The moonlight illuminated the jagged cliffs, and in the distance, he thought he saw something moving. It was large, far larger than any animal he had ever seen. His heart raced as he realized that the Nunda was close. He tightened his grip on his bow, steadying his breath. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up as he caught sight of glowing red eyes staring at him from the shadows. The Nunda had found him. Suddenly, the Nunda lunged from the darkness with terrifying speed, its massive form emerging from the shadows like a living nightmare. The creature was even more fearsome than the elder had described. Its fur was black as coal, and its fangs glistened in the moonlight. Cato had only moments to react. With a swift movement, he released an arrow from his bow, aiming for the Nunda's heart. But the creature was too quick. It dodged the arrow effortlessly and let out a deafening roar that sent a wave of fear crashing over Cato. He realized that he was not prepared for the true might of the Nunda. Cato stumbled backward, heart pounding in his chest. The Nunda's roar echoed through the forest, causing the ground beneath his feet to tremble. He knew that this was no ordinary hunt. The Nunda was a creature of darkness and terror, and no weapon or arrow would be enough to defeat it. He had to think differently. His mind raced as he recalled the ancient stories of creatures like the Nunda, stories of bravery, cunning, and magic. He remembered the elder's words, "Sometimes, strength alone cannot defeat such creatures." It was time for Cato to rely on something more than just his bow and arrows. He needed to outsmart the beast. Cato's mind raced as the Nunda circled him, its glowing red eyes fixed on him like a predator sizing up its prey. He knew that if he didn't act quickly, he would be the next victim of the terrifying creature. The beast's low growl filled the air, sending chills down Cato's spine. He couldn't outrun it. The Nunda was faster than anything he had ever encountered. Cato's only chance was to rely on his wits and the knowledge he had gained from his years of learning the ways of the forest. As the Nunda lunged again, Cato sidestepped at the last moment, narrowly avoiding the beast's razor-sharp claws. He felt the air rush past him as the Nunda's enormous form missed him by inches. Cato's heart pounded in his chest, but he kept his focus. He knew that the Nunda wasn't just a mindless beast, it was intelligent, and it could anticipate his moves. This battle wouldn't be won by brute force alone. Cato needed to outsmart the creature, find its weaknesses, and use the environment to his advantage. Cato's mind flicked to the elders' teachings about the behavior of beasts like the Nunda. In his stories, the elder had often mentioned that the strongest creatures could be deceived by their senses. The Nunda's acute hearing and sight were its strengths, but Cato realized that his own advantage was the knowledge of the forest's terrain. He spotted a cluster of thick vines hanging from a tall tree nearby. If he could reach them, he might be able to trap the Nunda, or at least slow it down long enough to plan his next move. With a swift motion, Cato darted toward the tree, his feet barely making a sound on the forest floor. The Nunda, momentarily distracted by the movement, followed Cato's trail. As Cato reached the tree, he jumped, grabbing the vines with both hands. The Nunda's massive paws scraped the ground as it reached out to catch him, but Cato swung upward, narrowly avoiding the beast's claws. From his perch high in the tree, Cato looked down at the Nunda, who growled angrily and paced beneath him. For a moment, Cato felt a rush of relief as he dangled from the tree, out of the Nunda's reach. But the relief was short-lived. He knew that the Nunda was relentless and that it wouldn't give up easily. The beast's powerful legs dug into the ground, causing the earth to tremble with every step. Cato scanned the area around him, searching for any possible escape or advantage. His eyes fell on a large boulder just beyond the clearing. If he could get to it, he might be able to use it to create an opening for an attack. Cato carefully dropped from the tree, landing lightly on his feet. The Nunda's attention snapped back to him, and it immediately charged. With a quick burst of speed, Cato dashed toward the boulder, using the thick underbrush to obscure his movements. The Nunda followed, its heavy footsteps causing the ground to vibrate. Cato's heart raced as he reached the boulder, just in time to use it for cover. The Nunda's massive form stopped short, snarling as it searched for its prey. It could sense Cato's presence, but could not pinpoint his exact location. Cato took a deep breath and steeled himself. He knew that this moment would decide everything. With the Nunda temporarily distracted, Cato reached for his bow, drawing one of the last remaining arrows from his quiver. He knew he had one shot. The Nunda's enormous figure loomed just beyond the boulder, its glowing eyes scanning the area. Cato didn't hesitate. With all his strength and focus, he released the arrow, aiming for the Nunda's heart, the one vulnerable spot he had learned about from the elder stories. The arrow flew through the air with deadly precision, striking the Nunda squarely in the heart. The beast let out a deafening roar, a sound filled with fury and pain. It staggered backward, blood spilling from the wound, but the Nunda did not fall. Instead, it turned toward Cato, its eyes blazing with rage. The creature's body trembled, but its strength was far from diminished. Cato had wounded it, but the battle was far from over. The Nunda was not going to be defeated so easily. Cato knew that he had only one chance left. He couldn't rely on his arrows any longer, he had to confront the Nunda face to face. He quickly scanned his surroundings for something that could help him finish the battle. His eyes landed on a large stone knife that lay half buried in the dirt near the boulder. It was an ancient weapon, one used by his ancestors. He grabbed it with both hands, feeling the weight of it in his palms. If he could get close enough, he could strike the Nunda down once and for all. The final confrontation between Cato and the Nunda had begun. The beast, now enraged and wounded, charged at Cato with a speed that seemed almost impossible. Cato stood his ground, gripping the stone knife tightly. As the Nunda lunged, Cato sidestepped and drove the stone knife deep into the creature's side. The Nunda roared in agony as it crumpled to the ground, its strength finally giving out. Cato, panting heavily, stood over the defeated creature, knowing that the battle had cost him more than he could ever imagine. The Nunda, the eater of people, was no more. As the Nunda's body lay motionless on the forest floor, Cato stood over it, breathing heavily. His chest rose and fell with each deep breath, the weight of the battle still settling on him. The forest, once filled with the sound of the beast's growls, was eerily silent now. The moonlight that had guided Cato through the night seemed to soften, as if the earth itself was acknowledging the end of the creature's reign. Cato, though victorious, couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The Nunda had been vanquished, but the cost of this victory was much more than he had anticipated. Cato knelt beside the Nunda's body, his fingers brushing over the dark fur. He had heard the stories, and he had fought with all his might, but now that it was over, a sense of emptiness washed over him. The villagers would celebrate his bravery, yes, but at what cost? He had slain a beast that had terrorized his people for generations, but in doing so, he had disrupted the delicate balance of the world around him. Cato had always believed that every creature, no matter how terrifying, had a purpose in nature. By killing the Nunda, had he sealed the fate of the forest itself? As Cato pondered the consequences of his actions, a strange rustling sound broke the silence. His head snapped up, and he immediately stood, hand on his bow. But it wasn't the Nunda returning for one last attack. From the shadows, a figure emerged, an old woman, with a weathered face and eyes that glowed with an unnatural light. She was draped in a tattered cloak, her movements slow but deliberate. Cato's hand instinctively reached for an arrow, but the woman raised her hand in a calming gesture, her voice soft and ancient. "Do not fear, young hunter," the woman said, her voice raspy but powerful. "I have been watching you." Cato lowered his bow slightly, though his grip remained firm. "Who are you?" he asked, still wary. The woman smiled faintly, her eyes filled with an ancient wisdom. "I am a guardian of the forest," she replied. The Nunda was not simply a beast of hunger, it was a creature of balance. It maintained a force in the natural world that you have now upset. Cato's heart sank as the gravity of her words hit him. The Nunda had not just been a monster, it had been a part of the world's order, and by killing it, Cato had disturbed that order. The woman continued, her gaze steady. "The Nunda was a creature of darkness, yes, but it also protected the forest from other forces that you cannot even begin to understand. Now that it is gone, the balance is broken, and the world will begin to shift. This forest, this land, will change in ways you will not be able to predict." Cato's mind raced. He had slain the creature to protect his village, but now it seemed that in doing so, he had invited a new kind of danger into the world. He had never imagined the Nunda's role was so complex. He had thought he was saving his people, but now he realized that every decision came with consequences. "But how can I undo this?" Cato asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "I didn't know. I didn't know what the Nunda was truly protecting." The woman's expression softened, and she stepped closer to Cato. There are ways to restore balance, but they are not easy. The Nunda's death has unleashed forces that cannot be stopped with simple weapons or arrows. You will need to seek the heart of the forest, where the ancient spirits dwell. Only there can you hope to find a way to restore what you have broken. Cato nodded solemnly, knowing that his journey was far from over. The Nunda may have been defeated, but now, he had to face a greater challenge, the task of mending the delicate web of life that he had torn apart. The woman stepped back and gestured toward the path leading deeper into the forest. The way is dangerous, and you will not be alone in this journey. But you must go now, before the consequences of your actions spread further. Time is of the essence. Cato stood tall, his resolve hardening once again. He had made a choice, and now he had to face the consequences. He could not turn back. The fate of the forest and his village rested on his shoulders. With a final glance at the old woman, he turned and began his journey toward the heart of the forest. As Cato ventured deeper into the forest, the atmosphere grew heavier. The once serene woods now felt oppressive, as if they too were aware of the disruption that had been caused. Strange sounds echoed through the trees, unfamiliar and unsettling. The usual peaceful rhythm of the forest seemed to have shifted. Cato's thoughts turned to the village. Would they understand the gravity of what he had done? Would they see his actions as a necessary sacrifice, or would they blame him for unleashing whatever dark forces now threatened the land? The weight of his responsibility felt like a stone in his chest. The deeper he traveled, the more Cato could feel the presence of ancient spirits watching him. The air was thick with an energy he could not explain. It was as if the forest itself was alive, breathing, and it was not pleased with his intrusion. Cato pressed on, determined to find the heart of the forest. He could not afford to fail. The longer he hesitated, the stronger the feeling of dread became. The forces that had been set loose were already beginning to stir, and Cato knew that he had no time to waste. After what felt like an eternity, Cato finally reached the heart of the forest. It was a place unlike any he had seen before, a clearing bathed in soft, golden light. In the center stood a massive tree, its roots twisting and sprawling across the earth like the veins of the world itself. The air here was thick with magic, and Cato could feel the ancient spirits of the forest surrounding him. It was here that he would seek the guidance he needed to restore the balance he had broken. But he knew that the task ahead of him would not be easy. The forest had its own laws, and he would have to prove himself worthy of its help. Cato stood at the edge of the clearing, staring at the massive tree before him. Its bark was dark and ancient, the gnarled roots twisting into the earth like a living thing. The air felt charged with a strange energy, and the ground beneath his feet hummed with power. He had come to the heart of the forest, but now that he was here, a new fear gripped him. Would the ancient spirits accept him? Or had he already gone too far in disturbing the balance? The task ahead seemed more daunting with every passing moment. As Cato stepped closer to the tree, the forest around him grew quieter, almost as if it were holding its breath. The leaves rustled softly, but no animals stirred. It was as though the forest was waiting for something. He approached the tree with reverence, feeling the weight of the moment settle upon him. The tree was not just a symbol of the forest, it was the forest itself, the heart of all life in this land. He placed his hand on the bark, and immediately, a shiver ran up his arm. The tree responded, as if recognizing his touch. Suddenly, a voice echoed in his mind, low and deep, like the rumble of thunder. "You have come, young one, but you have already broken the laws of the forest. The Nunda's death was but the beginning of the disturbance you have caused. The balance has shifted, and now, the land is in danger." Cato's heart raced as he heard the voice, feeling a sense of awe and fear. The tree, or the spirit within it, had spoken directly to him. The enormity of his actions was clearer than ever. There was no turning back now. The voice continued, its tone both stern and mournful. To restore balance, you must face the consequences of your actions. The creatures of the forest, those who lived in harmony under the Nunda's protection, are now free to roam unchecked. The beasts of the deep, who were kept at bay, will now rise. Cato felt a chill run down his spine. The Nunda had been a force of nature, a creature that had kept the balance of life in check. Now that it was gone, darker forces would begin to emerge. Cato had only just begun to understand the magnitude of the task before him. The voice of the tree shifted, growing more compassionate. But there is hope, young hunter. You have already proven your bravery by slaying the Nunda. Now, you must prove your wisdom and patience. Seek the beast of the Elder's Cave, a creature of great power. It is said to hold the knowledge you need to restore the balance. Cato nodded, though his heart was heavy with the weight of the journey that lay ahead. The Elder's Cave was a place of legend, hidden deep in the forest, filled with dangers of its own. Yet, if there was even a chance that the beast could help, Cato had no choice but to seek it out. Before Cato could speak, the voice faded, leaving only the soft rustling of the leaves behind. He stood alone in the clearing once more, the weight of the decision pressing heavily on his chest. He knew the road ahead would not be easy. The beast of the Elder's Cave was said to be a creature of unimaginable power, fierce, elusive, and dangerous. But Cato was no stranger to danger. He had faced the Nunda, and he had survived. Now, he had to face something even greater. With a deep breath, Cato turned and began his journey toward the Elder's Cave. The path was not clear, and the forest around him seemed to close in, its shadows darker than before. The once familiar trails were now strange, twisted, as if the forest itself had begun to change in response to the disruption he had caused. Every rustle in the underbrush, every snap of a twig, felt like a warning. Cato kept his senses sharp, knowing that every step could bring him closer to danger. As Cato moved deeper into the forest, the air grew thick and oppressive. The temperature dropped, and an eerie stillness settled over the land. It felt as though something was watching him, waiting for him to make a mistake. He kept his bow ready, his eyes scanning the dark corners of the forest. He couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was no longer on his side. The creatures that had once respected the Nunda's rule were now emboldened, and Cato had no idea what might be lurking in the shadows. Hours passed as Cato navigated the treacherous path. The forest seemed to close in around him, the trees pressing closer together, blocking out much of the light. The farther he went, the more unsettling the atmosphere became. It felt as though the forest was trying to keep him from his destination. Cato began to doubt his decision. Had he made a mistake? Had he angered the spirits of the forest beyond redemption? But there was no turning back now. He had to continue. Just as Cato's doubts began to consume him, the path opened up to a vast, rocky clearing. At the center stood a dark, ominous cave, the entrance shrouded in shadows. The air around it was heavy, charged with an ancient power that made the hairs on the back of Cato's neck stand up. He could feel the presence of something ancient within, something that had been waiting for him. The beast of the Elder's Cave was not far now. But as he approached, Cato's every instinct screamed that this was a place of great danger. Cato hesitated for a moment, his breath shallow, but then he stepped forward. He had come this far, and he would not turn back now. He had to face whatever lay within the cave, for the sake of the forest and his people. With each step, the air grew colder, the shadows deeper. As Cato crossed the threshold of the cave, He felt the weight of his journey press down on him like never before. The true test had begun. Cato stepped deeper into the cave, the darkness closing in around him. His breath echoed off the stone walls, sharp and quick in the still air. His footsteps were soft on the cold earth, but every sound he made seemed to reverberate loudly in the silence. The deeper he went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The air felt heavy with the weight of centuries, as if this cave had been waiting for him, just as the tree had foretold. His heart pounded in his chest as he gripped his bow tightly, ready for whatever lay ahead. The cave began to widen, and Cato found himself standing in a vast chamber, the ceiling stretching high above him. At the far end of the cave, glowing red eyes pierced through the darkness. The air was charged with a palpable sense of power. Cato could feel the presence of something ancient and immense, something that had lived in this place long before him. The beast of the Elder's Cave was real, and it was waiting for him. Its eyes locked onto Cato's, and for a moment, he felt as if the creature could see into his very soul. The beast's form began to emerge from the shadows, its features becoming clearer in the dim light. It was a towering figure, covered in dark, matted fur, with muscles rippling beneath its skin. Its claws scraped the ground as it moved, each step causing the earth to tremble. The Nunda was but one part of a greater cycle, the beast explained, its voice deep and resonant. It kept the darkness at bay, but now that it is gone, the void has been created. The forces that were held back are beginning to rise, and only you can stop them. Cato's mind raced as the weight of the situation pressed down on him. Could he really be the one to restore the balance? You are the key, the beast continued, its voice filled with both wisdom and sorrow. But your journey is far from over. You must seek out the Shadow Stone, a relic that lies deep within the lands of the forgotten. Only by retrieving it can you close the rift that the Nunda's death has created. The Shadow Stone holds the power to restore the forces that were once held in check. Cato's eyes widened. A relic, hidden away in forgotten lands, he had no idea where to even begin looking. But there was no turning back now. He had already come so far, and the fate of the forest and his village rested on his success. The beast's massive form began to shift again, as though it was preparing for something. There is a price to be paid for your actions, young hunter, it said, its tone softer now. The Shadow Stone is not easily obtained, and it will not be without sacrifice. You must be prepared to give something of yourself to restore the balance. Cato's heart sank as he considered the implications. What was the price? What would he have to give up? He had already lost so much, and now, he faced a choice that would cost him even more. Tell me what I must do, Cato said, his voice steady. He knew that time was running out. The forces of darkness were already stirring, and he had no time to hesitate. The beast regarded him for a long moment, its glowing eyes scanning Cato's face. Finally, it nodded. You must journey to the heart of the forgotten lands, beyond the mountains, through the deserts, and into the land of the lost. There, the Shadow Stone waits, but only one who is truly pure of heart can claim it. The beast's eyes softened, as if it knew the difficulty of the task Cato was about to undertake. But be warned, the journey is treacherous, and the stone is guarded by trials that will test every part of you. You may not return unchanged. Cato nodded, determination flooding through him. He had come so far. He had defeated the Nunda, but now he had to face an even greater challenge. He had no choice but to press on. I will go, Cato said, his voice firm. I will find the Shadow Stone, and I will restore the balance, no matter the cost. The beast nodded, its eyes filled with approval. Go then, young hunter. But remember, the path will not be easy. Be mindful of what you lose along the way, for some things, once given, cannot be taken back. With those final words, the beast retreated back into the shadows, its form fading from view. Cato was left standing in the vast, dark cave, the weight of his mission pressing heavily on him. He had no time to waste. The path to the Shadow Stone would not be an easy one, and he knew that dangers awaited him at every turn. But he was resolute. He had already sacrificed so much, and now, he would sacrifice whatever it took to restore balance to the land. The fate of the forest and his people depended on it.